Story 1, submitted by Harold Keene from Ashwood County, Missouri. I was 19 in the summer of '72, old enough to know better and young enough to think I didn't have to. My father had taken a night job at the mill, so the farm was mostly mine after sundown. Corn pressed in close to the house, and the barn sat a good 100 yards away, a dark shape against darker trees. That night I remember because the radio quit at exactly 2:10 a.m. No static, just silence, like someone had put a hand over the world. I was at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee that tasted burned no matter how much cream I added. I checked the breaker, but everything else still had power. At 2:14 a.m. the knocking began. It came from the barn, slow, deliberate raps like knuckles on wood. 3 knocks, a pause, then 3 more. Not loud, confident, as if whoever or whatever was out there knew I could hear it and didn't need to try harder. I stood there longer than I'll admit, staring at the back door. We didn't have neighbors close enough to walk over, especially not at that hour. Coyotes didn't knock. Wind didn't knock like it meant something. I told myself it was the old boards contracting, even though the night was warm and still. The knocking came again. 3. Pause. 3. I grabbed the flashlight from the hook and stepped onto the porch. The air smelled like hay and manure and something coppery underneath. The beam of light cut a thin tunnel through the dark, stopping short of the barn doors. I remember thinking how small the light looked, like it was embarrassed to be there. Halfway across the yard, the knocking stopped. That scared me more than if it had kept going. Silence can be a decision. I called out, my voice cracking on the second syllable of hello, and the sound fell flat, like it didn't reach anything that could answer back. The barn doors were closed when I got there. I know that for certain. We always left one open in summer. The boards were rough under my hand, the latch cool and damp. I put my ear to the wood. Nothing. No shifting, no breathing, no animals stirring. I knocked back. 3 raps, just like I'd heard. The sound echoed inside the barn, hollow and wrong. And then, from the other side of the door, something knocked back. 3. Pause. 3. Perfectly matched, right where my knuckles still tingled. I stumbled back, heart hammering. "Dad?" I said stupidly. My father was at the mill, and even if he'd come home early, he would have yelled first. He always did. The knocking came again, closer now. Not on the door. On the wall beside me. Then on the other side. It was moving, circling the inside of the barn, keeping pace with my breathing. I could feel it through the soles of my boots, vibrations traveling through old wood and packed dirt. I ran. I don't remember crossing the yard. I remember the porch boards under my hands and knees, the door sticking like it always did, my shoulder slamming into it hard enough to bruise. Inside, I locked it and leaned there, gasping, listening for footsteps. They never came. At 2:32 a.m. the knocking started again. This time it came from the kitchen wall, behind the cabinets. 3. Pause. 3. The rhythm was patient, almost polite, like it would wait all night if it had to. I pressed my palms over my ears, but I could still feel it, a dull tapping inside my chest. I told myself houses make noise. I told myself mice could do this, somehow. I told myself anything that didn't involve something learning where I lived. When it finally stopped, the silence felt heavier than the sound had. I didn't sleep. When dawn came, pale and weak, I walked to the barn with the shotgun cradled like a child. The doors were open. Inside, everything looked normal at first glance. Stalls empty, tools hanging where they belonged. Then I saw the marks, fresh dents in the wood, knuckle-sized and dark, like bruises. They weren't random. They formed a path along the walls, stopping at the inside of the main doors. On the ground, in the dirt, were footprints. Bare feet. Too long, toes pressed deep like whoever made them had leaned forward while walking. They led to the ladder that went up to the hayloft and stopped at the bottom rung. I didn't climb up. I didn't need to. Above me, carved into the beam over the ladder, were my initials. HK. The cuts were clean and new, pale wood showing through. I hadn't done that. I'd never carved my name anywhere in that barn. That night my father came home early. I told him everything. He listened without interrupting. then went quiet in a way I'd only seen once before when my mother left. He didn't check the barn. He didn't laugh. He just nailed the door shut and told me we'd talk in the morning. We never did. A week later, we moved. He sold the farm cheap and wouldn't say why. Years passed. He died without ever explaining. I tried to forget, and for a while I almost did. Last month, I woke at 2:14 a.m. in my apartment 3 states away. The radio on my nightstand went silent, and from inside my bedroom wall, something knocked, slow and confident, like it had finally finished the walk. Story 2, submitted by Lila Mae Donner from Ashwood County, Missouri. I was 7 in 1972, which meant the adults assumed I didn't understand much. They were wrong. I understood tone. I understood when my mother stopped humming while she cooked, and when my Uncle Earl wouldn't look at the tree line anymore. I understood that Ashwood County had started holding its breath. We lived on a dirt road that didn't have a name, just a number on the mailbox. Our house used to be a schoolhouse, one room stretched long and narrow, with windows that rattled even when the air was still. At night, my bed sat beneath one of those windows, and I'd count the stars I could see through the cracks. The night it happened, I woke up because the house felt crowded. That's the only way I can describe it. Not noisy, not cold, just occupied, like when relatives came over and you could feel them moving around even with your eyes closed. I lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to my mother and uncle breathing in the next room. Then I heard the footsteps in the hallway. They were barefoot. I knew because of the sound. Skin on old wood, a soft dragging step that caught on splinters. Too careful for a grown man, too heavy for a child. The steps stopped outside my door, which was open just a crack. I whispered for my mom. My voice came out thin, like it didn't belong to me anymore. Something shifted its weight on the other side of the door. I saw it before I understood what I was seeing. A shape lowering itself, slowly, so it could look in at me. It had hair, long and dark, hanging forward like a curtain. Its face stayed hidden behind it, but I could see its shoulders rising and falling, breathing in time with me. It knew my name. Not out loud, inside my head, the way you remember something, not the way you hear it. Lila, drawn out, familiar, like someone testing how it felt to use it. I pulled the blanket over my head and squeezed my eyes shut. I counted to 100 because that was what my teacher said to do when you were scared. I got to 83 before the footsteps moved again, retreating down the hall, slow and patient. In the morning, my Uncle Earl asked why my door had scratches on it. They were low near the floor, 4 long grooves where the paint had been pulled away. I didn't remember hearing anything like that, but my fingernails were dirty, and for a moment, everyone looked at me like they were doing math in their heads. That summer, other things started happening. Chickens stopped laying eggs. The well water tasted metallic, like a penny held too long on the tongue. Once I found my name written in the dust on the inside of the window, backwards, as if whoever wrote it had been standing outside, looking in. The adults talked in murmurs after dark. I'd sit on the stairs and listen. Words like the old fields and before the fences drifted through the house. My uncle started sleeping with a chair wedged under the doorknob. My mother began locking the windows, even on hot nights. One evening, Uncle Earl didn't come back from checking the traps. They found him at dawn, sitting on a stump near the creek, hands folded in his lap like he was waiting for someone. His eyes were open, staring ahead, glassy but dry. No marks on him, no sign of a struggle, just mud on his bare feet, even though he'd gone out in boots. After that, my mother decided we were leaving. We packed in silence. On our last night, I slept in her bed, my ear pressed to her chest, listening to her heart stumble and recover. Around 2 a.m., she stiffened. I felt it before I heard it. Footsteps. Not in the hallway this time. Outside. Circling the house. Slow, deliberate. The porch creaked under careful weight. My mother held me so tight I couldn't breathe. Her hand clamped over my mouth before I could make a sound. Something brushed against the window screen, fingers testing the mesh. I smelled damp earth and something sweet, rotting. The window glass fogged, a breath pressed against it from the other side. In my head, the voice came back. Not my name this time. A question. Which one? My mother shook, silent tears soaking into my hair. I didn't know what the question meant, but I knew the answer mattered. I did the only thing I could think of. I pictured myself stepping forward, offering. The footsteps stopped. The presence withdrew, like a tide pulling back. By morning the yard was empty, the dirt smooth except for a single set of footprints leading away from the house. Toes dug deep, heel barely touching. We moved to St. Louis that week. My mother never went back. She never talked about Ashwood County again. She married a man who liked bright rooms and loud televisions, and she learned how to smile without using her eyes. I grew up. I forgot things on purpose. Last year, my daughter turned 7. We moved into an old house with creaky floors and drafty windows because it was all we could afford. On her first night there, she came into my room around 2 a.m. and asked if someone was standing in the hallway. I told her it was just the house settling. When she went back to bed, I noticed the dirt under her fingernails, dark and packed in deep, like she'd been gripping the ground. And for the first time in 50 years, I felt the house lean closer, deciding. Story 3, submitted by Thomas R. Bell from Ashwood County, Missouri. In 1972, I was the only deputy assigned to the north end of Ashwood County. That meant long drives on empty roads and calls nobody else wanted. Folks said the land up there remembered things. I didn't believe in that. I believed in paperwork and patterns. And if something didn't fit either, it usually meant someone was lying. The call came in at 1:58 a.m. A farmer named Wade Henson reported lights in his field. No vehicles missing, no shots fired, just lights moving where they shouldn't be. Dispatch sounded relieved when I said I'd check it out. Henson's place sat at the end of a gravel road that narrowed into ruts. His porch light was on, and he stood there with his hat in his hands like he was at a funeral. He didn't invite me in. He just pointed past the barn toward the fields. "They're back," he said, same as before. I asked what he meant by before, but he'd already turned away. The field was fallow, dirt turned and left to rest. Out there, a cluster of pale lights drifted low to the ground, not bobbing like lanterns, sliding, smooth and silent, like reflections without a source. When I got closer, I realized they weren't lights at all. They were faces. Dim, colorless ovals, features barely suggested, hovering inches above the soil, eyes like wet thumbprints, mouths opening and closing without sound. They moved together, stopping when I stopped, as if they were tied to my pace. I raised my flashlight. The beam passed right through them and lit the dirt beyond. My radio crackled once, then died. I noted the time out of habit. 2:14 a.m. The faces began to sink. They pressed down into the field, one by one, dissolving into the soil like breath into cold air. The ground bulged and shifted. Then the knocking started, from everywhere, beneath my boots. 3 taps, repeating, traveling through the earth in waves. I staggered back, heart racing. The dirt rippled, and something moved underneath, fast and coordinated, like a school of fish. I ran for the barn, boots slipping, the knocking keeping time with my steps. Inside the barn, the air was stale and sweet. Hay bales loomed like stacked coffins. The knocking followed me in, now on the walls, the beams, the floor. The sound wasn't loud, but it was intimate, like it was happening inside my bones. "Sheriff's Department," I yelled, because that's what you do when you don't know what else to say. My voice came back to me wrong, stretched thin, as if the barn had learned how to mimic it. The ladder to the hayloft creaked. I didn't want to look, but I did. Something was coming down, rung by rung. Not visible exactly, more like the idea of a body, outlined by absence. The rungs bent under weight that shouldn't have been there. I fired my gun into the loft. The shots were swallowed whole. No echoes, no dust, just silence, followed by a soft, satisfied knock directly behind my right ear. I froze. A hand, at least I think it was a hand, rested on my shoulder. It was cold, not like winter cold, but like something that had never been warm. In my head, not my ears, a memory surfaced that wasn't mine. Standing barefoot in this field decades ago, pressing my palm into wet soil while someone behind me counted. 3. Pause. 3. The pressure on my shoulder tightened, then released. The knocking stopped. The weight on the ladder vanished. I ran until my lungs burned, until the barn lights disappeared behind me. I didn't look back. I didn't stop until I reached my cruiser and found the engine already running, headlights on, like it had been waiting. I filed my report at dawn. I wrote about suspicious lights and possible trespassers. I did not mention faces or knocking or memories that didn't belong to me. The report went into a drawer and stayed there. 2 weeks later, Wade Henson was found in his field, kneeling in the dirt. His hands were pressed flat to the ground, fingers splayed. He'd worn the skin off his palms. The coroner said heart failure. I signed the form. I transferred out of Ashwood County that fall. I thought I'd left it behind, thought the land would forget me the way I tried to forget it. Last night I woke up in my retirement house in Kansas, the sound of my own heartbeat loud in my ears. My bedside radio clicked off by itself. I checked the clock without meaning to. 2:14 a.m. From beneath the floorboards, something knocked back. Story 4, submitted by Eleanor Nell Watkins from Ashwood County, Missouri. In 1972, I was the night nurse at Ashwood County General, which sounds more official than it was. We had 12 beds, one working x-ray machine, and a boiler that groaned like it was alive. After midnight, the hospital shrank. Sounds carried farther. Shadows stayed longer. You learned the building's moods or it punished you for it. That summer, we started seeing patients come in just before 2 a.m. They never arrived together. Different farms, different roads, same look in their eyes. Wide, unfocused, like they'd woken up somewhere they didn't recognize and brought that feeling with them. They complained of chest pain, dizziness, pressure, always pressure, as if something heavy had been set down on them and forgotten. At 2:14 a.m., the monitors would start acting up. Heart rates flattened, then spiked. The radio at the nurse's station cut out, same as every night, leaving a hole of silence that felt deeper than quiet should. I learned to dread that minute hand sliding into place. The first one who died was a teenage boy, brought in by his older brother, who wouldn't stop apologizing. The boy had dirt packed under his fingernails and along the creases of his feet. No visible injuries. Just terror frozen into his face so completely it made my hands shake. He sat up in bed at 2:13. At 2:14 he started knocking on the mattress. 3 taps. Pause. 3 more. Weak, frantic. I grabbed his shoulders and told him to lie back. He looked straight at me, pupils blown wide, and whispered, "It found me anyway." Then his heart stopped. After that, it kept happening. Different patients, same minute, same knocking, always from inside their own bodies, on ribs, on bed rails, on walls no one else could hear. Doctors blamed stress, bad water, coincidence. I stopped arguing. I just started watching the clock. One night during a lull, I heard knocking from the supply closet. 3. Pause. 3. I stood there with my hand on the knob, every instinct screaming not to open it. When I finally did, the shelves were neat, untouched. But the smell inside was wrong, damp soil and rust. On the floor, pressed into a thin layer of dust, were footprints. Bare. Too long. They pointed inward. From then on, the hospital felt occupied, even when it was empty. Call lights flicked on by themselves. Curtains stirred without drafts. Sometimes, while charting, I'd feel a presence lean over my shoulder, close enough that my skin prickled, as if something were reading along. At 2:14 a.m. on August 22nd, the knocking came from the walls all at once. Every room, every corridor, a synchronized rhythm that turned the building into a drum. Patients woke screaming. One man tore out his IV and tried to dig through the linoleum with his hands. I ran from bed to bed, useless, shouting for orderlies who were already crying. Then it stopped. The silence afterward was absolute. Too clean, like a held breath. I realized then that it wasn't trying to get in. It already was. We lost 3 patients that night, all pronounced dead within the same minute. Administration called it a tragedy. The state sent inspectors. Nothing changed. I started sleeping during the day and drinking coffee until my hands shook at night. On my last shift, I found something carved into the underside of the nurse's station desk. Initials, dozens of them, old and new, layered over each other. Names I recognized from charts, from obituaries, from memory. Mine was there too. E.W. Fresh, pale wood showing through. At 2:14 a.m., the knocking began beneath the floor, directly under my feet, slow, expectant. I didn't wait for it to finish. I grabbed my coat and walked out, leaving my badge on the counter. The hospital closed 2 years later, officially for lack of funding. I moved away, built a quiet life, told myself buildings don't follow you. Tonight I'm in my own bed, in a different state, listening to the house settle. The clock on my nightstand glows in the dark. The radio clicks off without being touched. 2:14 a.m. The knocking starts from inside my chest, and this time, I know exactly what it's asking for.